Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, as always, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, we spent a lot of time this year talking, especially recently, about the Eastern Conference and how tight the playoff race is and how competitive it's looking to be. And we haven't spent as much time talking about the Western Conference, where the top has been pretty settled with the Phoenix Suns in control of that. Even though Chris Paul is out with an injury, they have an 8-game cushion. It seems like they are pretty far determined as the 1 seed. And then you have Memphis and Golden State look like they're pretty strongly entrenched in those 2 and 3 positions. They can flip flop, but they're there. But then the rest of the West is pretty interesting. And we've obviously spent plenty of time talking about the Lakers, so we don't have to talk about them because they're in the play-in position right now. But as you see it right now, Sap, how many legitimate championship contenders do you see in the Western Conference?
You know what? I'm surprised you here and say 6. Normally, you don't say that in the NBA.
Wait, sorry, say that again. I didn't hear you. Say that. How many?
Yeah, 6.
Whoa.
I know that. Look, this is going to be an odd year. I think the playoffs are going to be, talking about the conference. The Celtics right now, the 5 seed. You got Cleveland as a 6 seed. I don't think Cleveland's really a true contender. You could have 4 or 5, maybe even 6 teams in the Eastern Conference make it to the finals. And if you make it to the finals, you're a championship contender. Maybe not against Golden State in 2016, 2017, because they were so damn good. There's no team in the league that approaches that Golden State team, which was unbeatable back-to-back years and would have won 3 straight titles if not for the injuries to Klay Thompson and, of course, Kevin Durant even earlier than that. The reason I say 6 is because as good as Phoenix is, and look, Chris Paul is going to come back for the postseason, which actually may be a benefit because he gets a little rest and then should have more in the tank in the postseason. They're still the favorite there, the defending Western Conference champs. And I get that they're good on the road. They're good at home. They play defense. Their role players are excellent. Devin Booker's a stud. DeAndre Ayton's a star as well. Golden State early in the year looked like the team, but since Draymond Green's been out, they've been a sub 500 team. And Steph Curry went through like a 2-month stretch where he wasn't shooting the ball well.
It's torpedoed his MVP chances.
He's Jason Tatum may get more MVP votes than Steph Curry. Curry's averaging like 25 points per game, and he's shooting fairly well below 40%, which for him is awful. Memphis, we like the story, but can Ja Morant just carry them into that? The 3 teams I look at the West that kind of piqued my interest actually are Utah, Dallas, and Denver. Now, Utah last year had the best record in basketball, but we never really took them seriously. Maybe it's a case where they're the 4 seed and they surprise people, and Donovan Mitchell goes off and, they overachieve in the playoffs rather than underachieving, which they've done year after year. Dallas, because I don't know of a player in the league playing better than Luka Doncic right now. I think he would have been the leading MVP candidate if he didn't show up to the first month and a half of the season at about 180 pounds. And I'm not being hyperbolic. He weighed 280, which is 30 pounds more than he should. I mean, he's 6'7". He's kind of a big bone guy, but you shouldn't be 280 pounds when you're 6'7". He was massive. But the last 2 or 3 months, there's been no player in basketball better than him. And Denver, because obviously Nikola Jokic is again an MVP candidate, and you could probably set me straight on this a little bit more, but is there a chance that Jamal Murray comes back this year?
Yeah. Yes. And Michael Porter Jr., both of them.
Could. Now, if they come back, and again, when players miss a period of time in the regular season, it can have a benefit because, you get to the postseason when everybody's kind of dragging and these guys got a lot more in the tank. That team could be dangerous, right? I mean, they made it to the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago in the bubble. They could also be dangerous. That's why I put 6 teams in there, because I think, again, the first round of playoffs in the West are going to be fascinating. And I'm not even including like Minnesota, the Clippers, the Lakers, teams that are just outside of those 6 or in the play-in tournament. But I think, look, I wouldn't be shocked if Denver made it to the finals. If Michael Porter Jr. is back and Jamal Murray's back and they're playing at a high level, they could be, a team that surprises.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, it's because there is no team like the Warriors from 4 or 5 years ago. So that certainly opens things up. It's funny with talking about Denver, Sap, that Jokic, he rarely misses a game. He missed 1 game, and I guess he just needed the rest really badly because he returned the next game with 46 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, 4 blocks, and 3 steals. And then the next game, he had 32 points, 15 rebounds, and 13 assists. Like, those are video game numbers. You don't put those up in the NBA.
He's having a better year than he had last year, and he was the MVP, right? I mean,
he's averaging 26, almost 14 rebounds a game and 8 assists.
It's ridiculous. No, seriously, he and Embiid, I think, are the front runners, although I would still, put Giannis in there because I think he's the best player in the league. And what has he done this year to take that title away from him? I don't think anything. And he's better defensively than Embiid and Jokic, but, let's face facts. They don't generally factor that in all that much. They should. But, yeah, those are the three guys that I'd put at the forefront of MVP consideration. Yeah, so that's why – I look at Denver, and again, this with the caveat that is Murray and Porter coming back. Those are the two things, because you put those two guys on the court with Joker, and they're pretty darn good. I mean, now you got Murray who can go off and have huge games, and Porter Jr. We're both fans of his. There's times when I watch him, he reminds me a lot of Jason Tatum. He's just not as consistent as Tatum, but there are certain games where he looks to be that type of player. I think they're a sleeper team.
Sap, it seems to me, just doing a quick Google of some and reading an article for a second while you were talking, I wasn't ignoring you, but I was trying to enhance your point. It seems like Denver thinks that they're going to come back because they're preparing as if those guys are going to be available in the postseason. They're talking about sending them to the G League for 2 or 3 game, sort of tune up. So this Denver team could look very different come the postseason.
Yeah. And again, they have a little bit of background in that they did make the conference finals 2 years ago, and we saw Jamal Murray was brilliant in that postseason. I mean, who can forget the duels he had with Donovan Mitchell in that series against Utah? And Michael Porter Jr. is a talented guy. And look, I know Jokic has become kind of a polarizing player. There's a group of NBA people who just think that he's a stat patter. I don't know. When you're putting up 26, 14, and 8 on a nightly basis, and you play every damn game, that's pretty productive for me.
Well, he's crazy efficient. That's the thing. That's what differentiates him from somebody like Westbrook, who we talked a lot about in our last podcast, is that Jokic is an incredibly efficient player. He shoots free throws and 3-pointers at a high clip too.
He has an effective field goal percentage of .620, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's just phenomenal.
He's not a stat patter.
No, he's a great basketball player. He won the MVP last year, and maybe he'll be like Steve Nash, win back-to-back MVPs and not be considered an all-time great, although Nash made the Diamond Anniversary team. I think Jokic in 25 years, hopefully I'll be around. You certainly will be on the 100th anniversary team. I think if you win 2 MVPs, you're pretty much going to be on there. No, he's a brilliant basketball player. And the fact I like, such an important part of this is that he's durable. He shows up to play every night. And that's something we didn't talk about. I know last podcast we talked about the Celtics and the ascension of Jason Tatum. That's another thing I like about Jason Tatum. He plays 94% of the games. Like Jason Tatum, you can count on being there night in and night out. And that's a big thing for me, especially when, you're following the Lakers and Anthony Davis seems to be out more than he's in. And all these players are on load management. I mean, Jokic he's there every night. Give the man credit.
Jokic is there tonight. Tatum, that's a good point. Tatum's been very available this season. In fact, the only time he's missed is for COVID reasons, not for an actual injury. So you really like the Western Conference. That's interesting step. I like a lot of these teams. I agree with you on Denver that I think they're a sleeper, sneaky championship contender. I don't believe in Utah at all. I just don't. I don't think they have any consistent secondary scoring.
Yeah,
to Donovan Mitchell.
That's true.
Bogdanovich is their secondary scorer, and he's not consistent enough, and he doesn't put fear in terms of any defenses. You and I both feel that Rudy Gobert is a very overrated player. So I'm not. I don't believe in Utah at all. And Dallas, they've been playing better, especially since they dumped Porzingis on Washington, and Dinwiddie seems to be a good fit on Dallas. But I don't think they have the horses to. You need horses plural to be able to win a championship.
Luka is a guy who can win a round or two. I mean, he's almost beaten the Clippers the last 2 years. I mean, he's certainly played. Good enough.
He did it in the freaking Olympics. He won a round or two.
He's. I mean,
with neighbors from Slovenia, not professional basketball level players.
With cousins and his cousins' kids, and it was pretty amazing who he dragged with him to the bronze or silver medal.
Yeah, bronze.
Bronze medal. That was quite an accomplishment by Luka, who, I've got to call him up on Full Press Coverage. The 5 best players, 24 and younger. I have him 1 and Tatum 2. I moved Tatum up to 2 over John Morant because John Morant, I love John Morant.
Because the argument I made, Sap, the very smart argument I made.
You made a great argument. And the other thing, too, is I watched the game last week against Memphis, against the Celtics, and Ja had a weird game. He scored 38, but I don't think he played all that great. He really struggles from the outside. And like Jason Tatum, you can't give him that type of room. He'll, spend the entire game drilling threes and 20-footers or anything else. I mean, he's just a more efficient player. And like you said, he's 6 inches taller. I mean, size does matter when it comes down to a flip of coin, give me the bigger guy. But the thing about Luka, I think he may be the most skilled guy in the league, right? I mean, let's take LeBron aside, but he may be the most skilled guy in the league. When I say skill, there's nothing he can't do. Obviously, he's oftentimes disengaged on the defensive end. I get that. But offensively, he could shoot. He could score in areas. He's a brilliant passer, outstanding rebounder. I think he makes his teammates better. I mean, he can do so many things. So he gives you a little bit of scare. But I get the Utah part of it. The only reason I'm throwing Utah in there, because I've seen this so many times in sports where a team that every year is really good and then peters out in the playoffs, at some point they kind of fall to the middle of the pack. No one expects them, and there's no pressure on them, and they kind of overachieve. That could happen. The Utah Jazz have somewhat become like the Green Bay Packers of the NBA. They have these great regular seasons, and then they don't produce in the postseason. That hurts me to say that, Jet. You know that.
I know it does. But I know it does.
I think it's an apt comparison.
Do any of these teams interest you at all? Any of the teams that are in playing position right now? The Timberwolves, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Pelicans. Any intrigue with any of those teams?
Well, if Anthony Edwards comes back, and we've seen that Karl Anthony Towns has played great this year, a young team like that, especially a player like Anthony Edwards, because every year we'll see that young player who just kind of grows before our eyes in the postseason. He could be one of those guys, but I just don't think they have the depth to really go far. Look, if the Clippers ever get Paul George back, and if Kawhi shows up, then you've got another contender in there. 2 guys that have been out most of this year. And
it seems unlikely that they're going to play this.
Unlikely. Yeah, Kawhi's not exactly a guy that's going to rush back to get on the court. The Lakers need to draw an inside straight flush. You need Anthony Davis to be healthy, and you need these other guys that have sucked this year to play better. I mean, good luck with that. New Orleans, I think they've actually kind of overperformed considering that Zion Williamson hasn't played a minute.
Brandon Ingram's been playing great for them.
Brandon Ingram's really good. He's kind of like a skinny, poor man's Jason Tatum. And I know he was 1 year ahead of Tatum at Duke. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know. I think they have a poor relationship. I've seen games, New Orleans and Boston. Maybe it's just being competitive, that they don't seem to really get along. I don't know. But no, Ingram's a hell of a player. I mean, would the Lakers have been better just to hold the ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, and, Julius Randle, and build with those guys around LeBron? I mean, LeBron is impatient, wants ready-made superstars with him, but maybe in the long run they would have been better off not making the Anthony Davis trade. Although
it's a lot of
they
depth.
did win a title. There's a lot of depth there, and they did win a title. I mean, you
traded for a title, 100%.
Exactly. You trade a title for question marks. But yeah, I wouldn't say any of those play-in teams. Whereas in the East, you've got Brooklyn in the play-in tournament, and if Simmons comes back, they scare the hell out of everyone. I mean, if Simmons comes back in the final 4 weeks of the season and it works, they'll go into the playoffs as the favorite even team in the play-in.
Sap, say in the West, say Minnesota sticks at 7 and plays Memphis if they stick at 2. Can Minnesota beat Memphis?
Yeah, so. I mean, Memphis has had a great year, but boy, what a matchup that would be. Anthony Edwards and John Morant, especially if they, go mano a mano. That would be pretty interesting. Maybe the 2 best athletes in the league at this point. Karl Anthony Towns would be a tough matchup. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a nice player from Memphis. But yeah, that could be a 7 over a 2 matchup. Absolutely.
What about this one? What about New Orleans?
New Orleans, no. I can't see
if
them.
Zion came back.
That's a big if, though. I mean, I what do you feel more comfortable with saying, Zion's coming back or Kawhi? Probably
Zion
neither's coming.
slightly
Because Kawhi's track record
because he's got a contract implications about it.
Right. Yeah, Kawhi, we know, won't play unless he's 100%.
Already paid. He's fine. He doesn't.
Yeah, he's doing whatever Kawhi does. Yeah, I if Zion comes back, then that's an interesting one. I think the most interesting matchup would be Denver Golden State. 6 versus 3, and if Draymond's not back, or if Draymond's back but not healthy, they're a completely different team with Draymond Green and without him. We know that. I mean, we're both Draymond Green guys, and Klay Thompson, since he's come back, love him. He's not the same player. He's got one game this year with 25 or more points, and he's played 32 games. Yeah, he's not the same player.
He hasn't looked at all the same player. Golden State started out the year like a house on fire. And things have really petered out. Well, it's also they're not spring chickens anymore on that team.
No.
They're older guys.
Yeah, I mean, Curry's 34, Klay's 32, Draymond's an old 31. Right? I mean, he's beaten up. I mean, he's
a lot of miles
there. And just think about going to the finals 5 straight years. Although oftentimes they didn't have long series, but that's like playing another year and a half.
And Draymond played in the Olympics this past year too.
Yeah. Yep. And look, he's not going to get MVP votes, but in the true sense of MVP, look at the team's record with and without him. It's incredible. But yeah, Andrew Wiggins, since the All-Star game, has played worse. Oftentimes, like you mentioned in a prior podcast, seems like Jason Tatum plays better after the All-Star game. Like he feels that he's vindicated and he's one of the guys, and he goes off and plays even better. Andrew Wiggins went to his very first All-Star game this year and has played terrible since. Again, I don't think he deserved to be on the All-Star team, but he did make it. Golden State, that could be I wouldn't even call it an upset. Denver over Golden State, especially if Draymond Green's not healthy.
Yeah. Who would you, if you're Denver, who would you rather play, Golden State or Utah?
Utah. Yeah, you'd rather play Utah. I mean, although Jokic would still dominate Rudy Gobert, I think. And again,
he historically has.
Yeah, I mean, Gobert to me is one of the most overrated players in the league. Keeps winning Defensive Player of the Year. He's probably going to make the Hall of Fame based on that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
The key thing was Denver, of course, is Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. If they come back, then I think Denver's a sleeper team in the West.
And you still feel, I'm assuming, because we haven't talked about that much because they're so firmly at the top, you still feel very good about Phoenix, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I do, because I think Chris Paul missed weeks of the regular season. It's not an injury where it's a torn calf or a knee or anything. It's a broken thumb. He'll come back. He'll be fine. He'll be better rested heading into the postseason. Booker, we obviously saw last year in the postseason, is a stud. Ayton, very capable in the pivot. And you need that guy because you're going to be playing, maybe the Western Conference Finals turns out to be Phoenix, Denver. So, he's going to have to deal with Jokic. And then that's such a well-constructed team. Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, Bridges, Jay Crowder. I mean, they're just really good together. And I think that, and then you get JaVale McGee, who's like the lucky charm that keeps winning titles as the backup center. It was a great move because they lacked that last year.
They killed him. Yeah, killed him again.
I bet if JaVale McGee's on the team last year, well, it's tough to say, but maybe they beat Milwaukee. Who knows? But yeah,
I don't think they lose 4 straight to Milwaukee if JaVale McGee was on the team last year.
No, probably goes 7. I mean, it got to the point where Giannis just had a highway to the basket, and when that happens, you're not beating the Bucks. And again, a lot of that had to do with Monty Williams, who refused to build a wall, which is really the only way to deal with Giannis. And Giannis has found ways to beat that as well when it is put forth against him. But yeah, Phoenix looks to me like the favorite. And, again, they have the ability to look back to last year. Phoenix and Milwaukee are 2 teams that can say, look, we got there last year, so we feel comfortable we can do it again.
And I think Phoenix did a really smart thing with the Chris Paul thing and said, okay, let's look at the standings. Yeah. Memphis and Golden State aren't catching up 8 games to us, even if we play, poorly without Chris Paul. We're not gonna just completely bomb the rest of the season to the point where, our seeding is in jeopardy. So they said, Chris, if you need 4 weeks, take 6 weeks.
Exactly.
I think it totally makes sense. It's a smart strategy. Chris Paul has sometimes petered out in the playoffs. There's no reason he should this year. And yeah, I think it sets up very, very nicely for Phoenix. If Phoenix is in fact the favorite in the West, Sap, is there a team in the East that they really don't want to see?
Only because they lost to them last year, and Milwaukee would be that team. Man, the Philly-Phoenix finals would be interesting, wouldn't it? You'd have Embiid, I think, would obviously outplay DeAndre Ayton, but, Chris Paul against James Harden would be pretty interesting. They probably should have got to a final together in Houston. I know they had a falling out, which isn't a surprise with those two guys. I don't think Phoenix – I still think Phoenix is vulnerable. I love Monty Williams, but I hope that he is able to adjust more than he did last year in the finals, which he didn't do a very good job of that. So maybe he'll learn from that. He's a very bright coach, one of my favorite coaches in the league. But I think that Milwaukee would cause problems because Giannis is, he's a cheat code. You really can't deal with him. And I think Philadelphia would also be an issue. And look, if Brooklyn's got their act together, they match up with anyone. If those three guys are playing engaged and Kyrie's able to play at home, Brooklyn still could win this thing. I think it's going to be difficult for them to put it all together in the final 4 or 5 weeks of the season. It's not easy to do, but because I think Kyrie and Durant fit so well together, and I think Simmons will fit perfectly too, I think they can get their act together pretty quickly if that happens, but that's a big if.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people saying, well, there's not really enough time for them to gel. And I say that's the case with a team that didn't have a lot of veterans, but they have a ton of veterans on that team. And I don't think, and Simmons, say what you want about him, is a smart basketball player. And I think would really like to have zero pressure to score on him and just create. I think I don't, it's hard to get in that guy's head. So I think that he could come back with like a game left in the regular season and they could be, if they're all right, I think they could scare the hell out of everybody in the NBA.
Oh, without question. Yeah, because, even in that loss to the Celtics on Sunday, Tatum was brilliant. Kyrie was not very good, and it was still only a 6-point win by the Celtics.
No, Tatum had to put up 54 for them to beat him.
Right. Tatum actually almost outscored Kyrie and Durant together. I think those two guys combined for 56, which is pretty good. But Tatum had 54 on his own. Yeah, that's how good Brooklyn is, right? Durant puts up 37 points with less fuss than any player I've ever seen. He's so damn efficient. And, in theory, Kyrie will probably play better, although he does seem to struggle a little bit at the Garden, since going to Brooklyn, although he had a good playoff game last year. But on Sunday against the Celtics, not so much. But, yeah, if you had Ben Simmons, put it this way, if Ben Simmons was on that Brooklyn roster, that would have been even a more difficult game because at least he could make Tatum work harder to get to 54. And look, a guy like Tatum can be unstoppable, but Ben Simmons is an elite defender. I think he would do a better job than what the Brooklyn Nets were doing, which, they switch so often that oftentimes you saw Kyrie Irving trying to cover Jason Tatum or, Seth Curry or Dragic or whoever.
No, they're a poor defensive team. That's why why Simmons is big for them. They're not good defensively.
No, and they're a poorly coached team. I think Steve Nash is still clueless over there. And I think that, you don't
He's
normally
there just purely to cater to the players' whims. They hired a straw man coach.
Exactly. Yeah. Kyrie said we could coach our own team. He may be onto something there. But yeah, their defense doesn't adjust. In that game, why aren't you doubling Jason Tatum? Make him go to a teammate, force the ball out of his hands. Celtics did that against Durant, right? You don't want your best guy beating you. And you just saw the difference in the coaching staff between the Celtics.
If they win, they're going to win playing pickup. That's how they're going to win. But they can because they have the talent to do it.
Yep, they sure do. Well, there's still a team that no one wants to face, but what they're like over the next 4 weeks is going to be interesting. But look, this playoff is going to be so unpredictable because there's so many teams that have a chance. In the past, for 4 straight years, it was okay, LeBron's going to meet Golden State. Like, we kind of just knew that going in. But since that point, we had Toronto win a championship. We had Miami lose to the Lakers in the finals. Last year, Phoenix and Milwaukee was a pleasant surprise. So, because you don't have a team like Golden State when they had Durant, Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. There's no team in the league even remotely close to that. Brooklyn, healthy, engaged, probably can get to the closest to that. But that's a lot of ifs there because, who's more reliable, Kyrie or Steph Curry? Curry. Who's more reliable, Draymond Green if he's healthy, or Ben Simmons? It's Draymond Green. And oh, by the way, they had Klay Thompson too. So I think it's gonna be a fascinating playoff. And the NBA has always been criticized of having, very predictable playoffs. This year is going to be interesting. I think you'll see some upsets very early, which is pretty enticing.
I agree with you. There's no super teams, and that's really good for the league. And the playoffs do seem wide open. So it's definitely an exciting time to be a basketball fan, and we're looking forward to the playoffs. But that's going to do it here for us, Sap, at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. As always, presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out the podcast wherever podcasts are found. You can check out the YouTube version on youtube.com/JetStryer. And you can check out our social medias for all sorts of great polls. And Sap just wrote a column this week, so check that out at John Sap 25 and at JetStryer. We'll talk to you later, everybody. See ya.